Leading things off, she is a political columnist for Town Hall, award-winning writer and a gun rights policy expert, as well as a commentator for Young Voices. Gabriella Hoffman is our guest. Gabriella, thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you?
Good to be with you. I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm doing just fine for a Friday anyway. I can't complain. Well, let's get right into it. Yesterday was the final January 6th hearing of the summer, so it sounds like there's going to be even more in the near or not-so-near future. What can people take away from it? And I guess my question is, how are they trying to tie former President Trump into this?
Well, if people have been tuning into the January 6th committee hearings at prime time, there's, some people are watching, but it's not the whole totality of the country. You can take away from these proceedings essentially what it aims to do. It's one of the few cards up the Democrats' sleeve that they have to try to make Republicans look bad, and by extension, the former president. They're looking to convict him a third time, essentially, through these proceedings. They're trying to find other things to impugn his supporters. Certainly, all the people who were involved in organizing the January 6th insurrection have been punished, and people will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But people see that they're trying to go beyond that to try to make a point. And to try to impugn all Republicans, say that they're anti-democracy, things of that sort. So the goal essentially is to make Republicans look bad, to deflect, you could say, from the bad policies that are now being traced back to, obviously, this administration and, by extension, congressional Democrats. So that's the only thing they have for them, even if you can consider it something that they can use to their benefit. But it's one of the few things they have left to try to paint their political opponents in a negative light, to deflect from where their policies are making this country going in terms of direction-wise, and in a bad direction.
I think that there's a couple of things that have a lot of people just have problems wrapping their head around. And one of those is that, okay, yes, there were a few bad apples during the January 6th riots out at the Capitol, but we saw pictures of a guy dressed up in a buffalo costume. We saw an older lady who turned out to be a cancer patient just hanging out in the Capitol. We saw a guy carrying away a lectern with a big smile on his face. And it didn't look like an insurrection. There was nobody armed. The only person that ended up dying as a result of the insurrection was Ashley Babbitt, and she was, of course, on the side of the rioters. So it's hard to paint this as an insurrection, in my opinion. And then number two, this happened almost a year and a half ago now, and people have moved on, and there's a lot more pressing things that people are worrying about, such as inflation.
Yeah, your latter point is correct. People are trying to move forward, whether it is beyond examining 2020, rehashing the 2020 election, and even January 6th. So I think voters are looking for someone or candidates who are going to, or a party rather, who's going to address their needs, their immediate needs, including inflation, high gas prices, surging crime, other top line item issues that are more pressing, that have more of an impact on them compared to January 6th. The people who are paying closely to January 26th are largely lawmakers here in Washington, D.C., and a few people in the Beltway, and those in New York City and some other media epicenters. Most of the country is not focused on this. Like I said, they're focused on other priorities and figuring out how to survive going forward. So people are, of course, going to pay attention to their pocketbooks most. That's usually what dictates elections. And January 6th is going to be an afterthought if the Republicans are to sweep both congressional races and also Senate races as well, and state legislature races, including on top of that as well. So, it seems like misplaced priorities and that it's not reflecting the will of the voters. So we'll see what happens in the midterms, but people are not going to cite January 6th as a motivating factor for voting.
Gabriella Hoffman is our guest. She is a political columnist and award-winning writer for Town Hall, and she joins us here on Dialogue on 1240 AM and 102.7 FM KBIZ. So big picture, how does this affect the re-election, President Trump looking to get elected once again in 2024? Because living here in Iowa, we can see the sharks starting to circle. We see President Trump, Mike Pence. It looks like he'll be running. Nikki Haley looks like she'll be running as well. Tucker Carlson made an appearance last week at a Republican fundraiser. So, I guess my first question is, how does this affect, or does this affect President Trump's re-election his reelection. The word is escaping me now. Him trying to get reelected, and then I guess how do you look at the whole race as a whole?
I think there are other factors that could affect his reelection prospects more than January 6th. They'll certainly use it. Let's say if they convict him of something, they could use it against him, and some Republicans may get cold feet about supporting him. But I think people will see whether or not, let's say Arizona's going to be a litmus test really about whether or not the president's machinations in the state, the former president's machinations in the state will have an impact, or if people are not going to really lean on him and vote kind of in contrast to his recommendations. That's something to look out for. And so I think, let's say, if he has a series of losses in the upcoming primaries, he declares early and Republicans lose, he will be blamed for perhaps maybe distracting Republicans. If he waits until after the midterms and they do well and he has perhaps a measured tone and is not distracted by different things or putting up mixed messaging, that could counter, let's say, Republican prospects. I think that's more worrisome than, let's say, what could happen with January 6th. And he may have to worry about challenges from the right. Like you said, a lot of people are going to Iowa to test whether or not they can run for office in 2024 and see if there's an appetite for someone other than Trump. And polling is starting to show that maybe some candidates may emerge. Like I said, voters are waiting until the midterms. They're waiting to see, does he have the acumen to run? Did he learn from his past mistakes from losing? Is he going to be a little more measured? Is he not just going to focus on 2020? Is he going to be forward thinking and focus on priorities? Because you even start to see some people who voted for him are starting to sour on him if they see that he's too much focused on the past and not so much on rectifying the current problems and bettering the future.
Gabriella, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts on the January 6th hearing as well as the future in 2024, especially here in Iowa. We really appreciate it. Thanks for taking time out of your morning for joining us. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. That was Gabriella Hoffman, a political columnist at Town Hall, award-winning writer and gun rights policy expert, and she joins us here on Dialogue.